$500 million.
देख भाई 300 रुपए दूंगा तेरे को.
Deal.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host kushalmehra. So today we are going to cover the India-US trade deal, and to talk about it, I have Karan Bhasin with me. Karan, क्या हाल है? And मैंने तेरा आर्टिकल पढ़ा जो तूने प्रकाश क्या लोंगानी के साथ लिखा है. ये आज ही आया इधर बिजनेस स्टैंडर्ड में. तो वो मीम परफेक्ट था हमारी ट्रेड डील का. उसने इतना मांगा, हमने वाला 300 रुपया दूंगा, लेना है ले, नहीं तो जा इधर से.
Nee, so I think, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. It's always great to talk to you. ये deal was a long time in coming. You know, मतलब मैं 2019 से expect कर रहा था कि something like this would happen. Somehow तब नहीं हुआ, and then उसके बाद COVID hit, priorities changed, नहीं हुआ. Last year मेरे को expectation थी कि एक basic framework दोनों countries ने 2020 में agree कर लिया था, you know, for deal, and somehow it didn't happen then because US wanted a bigger deal, you know, more comprehensive deal. But for some reason, I think this time around their priority was different. When they came in, they said that they're open to sector-specific deals. I don't know why it took too long. मतलब we can all speculate कि क्यों इतना ज़्यादा time लगा. But एक fact तो है ही, which, you know, even the president of US acknowledged, that Modi is a much tougher negotiator. So that is something that is already out there on record, right? So when I feel that we basically got the best possible deal that we could have, you know, gotten. So 3 हफ्ता पहले if you would have talked to me, या even 2 दिन पहले 3 दिन पहले you would have asked me, मैं कहता 25% भी मिल जाए ना तो भी बहुत है, because 50% is too high. It's really hitting our textiles and gems and jewelry, right? We really needed to gradually come to a more reasonable level, and 25 seemed like a reasonable level. But because we have a very tough negotiator, in fact we have tough negotiators on both sides, eventually it settled at 18%. So I'm very glad that it's 18%. So on that front, I think we did reasonably well. I think we couldn't have gotten a better deal. I saw कुछ लोग कह रहे थे कि हमने 0 कर दिया, उन्होंने 0 क्यों नहीं करा. इसका कोई मतलब नहीं है. मतलब 0% हमने कर दिया तो हमारे लोगों को 0% टैरिफ देना है जब वो बादाम लेते हैं, ठीक है. 18% हमें नहीं देना. 18% जो लगा है वो यहाँ पे देना है, ठीक है. सो इट डजंट मैटर वो 18 हो या वो 15 हो या वो 17 हो, as long as it's lower than our competitors, that's okay for us. So that's the broad you know, way that I look at it. Look at this deal.
So from what I understand, most of the points were finalized a long time ago. It all went downhill since Orangea started claiming that I stopped the India-Pakistan war, and we did not give him that win. That ਭਾਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ great ਹੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਤਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣਾ ਸੀ. So we did not give him that. So he got mad, and they were doing that. Secondly, from day one, I know this for a fact because I'm not taking names, but I know the negotiators who are negotiating on behalf of India. The Commerce Ministry was very clear, the Prime Minister's office was very clear that we are not going to give them dairy and agriculture. Agriculture में जो हमें चाहिए हम उनको दे रहे हैं, and कुछ जगहों पे हमने उनके allow किया है with quotas. ऐसा है, we have, and that's what it is. We are not allowing anything else. And this has been from day one. The thing was, everything was stuck is because Trump needed a win, public win, to show to his domestic crowd. It was more about domestic politics. And we have two very strong personalities on both sides where both have to manage their domestic politics, whether it's Prime Minister Modi and whether it is, President Trump. And that led to this. I think India signing a deal with EU really accelerated things.
So I would make another point that, you know, we did a deal with New Zealand, and again we have two democracies, and then, you know, we came in and celebrated that deal. तो हमारे लिए तो डील अच्छी थी, but वो वहाँ पंगा हो गया because वहाँ coalition government थी, right? So on whenever you're doing a deal, both sides have to be sensitive to political realities in the domestic
Yes.
economy, right? Otherwise, even though you may agree to a deal, getting it implemented would become challenging. Luckily, that New Zealand situation didn't, escalate, and we now have a basic agreement that exists in both those countries. But yes, I mean, I think the European deal did accelerate a lot of things. My own understanding is कि EU के साथ जो हमारी deal थी, that was much more ambitious than what I would have imagined. Because if you look at what we did with US, if you look at what we did with Australia, New Zealand, those were good deals, but not, we didn't go as far as we went with Europe. I don't know if the idea originally was to also go as far with the US, but now, of course, once you're doing it with the Euro, you should be also doing it, with the US. So I think that also kind of gave a lot of clarity on both sides on what is really possible and what is not possible. Because इतनी deals एक साल में होगी that hopefully, both sides understood that these are the red lines. These are not going to be given no matter what. कोई भी trade partner आ जाए, these are basically no-go zones. And once that clarity settles in, then you know that no matter what you do, no matter how long you hold out, essentially this is the best deal that you can get. So you might as well take the best deal, because a deal is better than no deal. Basically, that's I think what kind of happened post the EU wala deal.
Yeah.
My
So
my other issue is कि we are looking at the deal like कि हमको डेयरी नहीं खोलना था, मतलब ठीक है नहीं खोलना था for political reasons, but Amul sells their milk here, right? And Amul gets milk यहाँ पे, makes butter here, and then sells it accordingly. So if you would have given access, it wouldn't be कि यहाँ से they would have gotten milk from farmers here and shipped it to India, because unit economics does not really make that possible. Uh, so I don't know why we have those red lines. I guess if you want investments in agriculture, at some point you would have to let foreign players invest in creating those supply chains and logistics. Farm laws were brought in precisely to let at least domestic companies do that for our farmers. But I guess वो ये ना once bitten twice shy वाला हिसाब है. Because we couldn't do farm laws, this would have eventually become a bigger contentious issue. If we
it's
would have
also
done,
a religious issue for us. If we cannot allow some of the things that they do with their dairy sector over there in India,
but
it
they
is
would
a
not do
religion.
that. They would not do that in India, because if they're getting it from Indian farmers, if they're getting milk from Indian farmers, then basically whatever practices Indian farmers are following, that's the practice that would be followed, right? I mean, it's not कि US से दूध मतलब वो उस प्लास्टिक के उसमें भर के they would ship here. That is just too expensive for them to do. Milk
बॉटल
powder,
में दूध आएगा, बॉटल में, प्लेन में.
बॉटल वगैरह, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, right? मतलब अमूल का 30-40 का आता है वो पैक, right? How do you compete with that? There's no way that I'll give you another example. Pencils पे we have a duty, right? Stationery items India में इतनी सस्ती हैं. Even if you don't protect them, these guys cannot compete at that price point. Quality branding वगैरह में they might be able to compete, but on the price point they cannot compete. So at some point we have to also recognize कि हमारी खुद की history में pre 91 post 91 we benefited a lot from lowering of tariffs, right? Even though the world is looking more inwards, we should be willing to look outwards and gradually reduce tariffs, because otherwise some of the big guys will not invest in our economy. Especially हमारे खुद के industrialists would be reluctant to invest unless they have this threat of competition coming from outside. So you have to create that credible threat. अब 10 साल हो गया है, investment is not kicking in. So I think finally government has also realized कि बहुत protect कर लिया. Now you either invest, otherwise we are opening the sector, because we want the economy to grow. We cannot wait for you guys forever.
Hmm. No, so another bit, yeah, this was written by Sudhir Ranjan Sen, Dan Shrumpf, and Shruti Srivastava. Again, I don't know. There's no evidence. It's all sources. This was also released today on Bloomberg, which says Doval told Rubio that India wouldn't be bullied by US President Donald Trump and his top aides. The people said, and would be willing to wait out his term having faced other hostile US administrations in the past. But New Delhi wanted Trump and his aides to dial down their public criticism of India so they could get relations back on track, Dowell said in the meeting. At that time, India was smarting from Trump's insults and the 50% tariffs he slapped on on its goods in August. The US president had called India a dead economy with high tariffs and that it was facing Putin's war in Ukraine by buying Russian oil. It wasn't long after Dowell's meeting, which was previously unreported, that the first signs of an ease in tensions emerged. On September 16th, Trump called Modi on his birthday and praised him for doing a tremendous job. By the end of the year, the two leaders had spoken 4 more times on the phone as they inched towards a deal. Basically, हमने उनको बोला जा जो करता है कर ले, हम नहीं डरते, जो करता है वो कर ले.
I mean,
And
you know,
ट्रम्प की खासियत ये मालूम वो थूक चाट लेता है,
तो
उसको कोई शर्म नहीं आती है.
मेरा अपना असेसमेंट ये है कि हमारी इकोनॉमी वाज much more resilient than what I would have expected over the last year. Hats off, hats off to Indian businesses, MSMEs, especially in the sectors that were badly hit. The reason this deal has happened is because they were willing to go through a lot of pain, right? And
भाई मैं
because
टेक्सटाइल से हूँ, टेक्सटाइल में कोई इतना मेजर पेन नहीं हुई है. आई डोंट नो व्हाई पीपल से यार बॉस मैं आई लिटरली हैव अ फोन कॉल्स एक्सेस टू ऑलमोस्ट एवरी बिग पर्सन. वाज देयर प्रॉब्लम? नो, बट दे डाइवर्टेड देयर ऑर्डर्स. आई डोंट नो व्हाई पीपल कीप क्लेमिंग दिस.
no, but
अरे भाई
I
किसी धंधे वाले को फोन करके पूछेगा धंधा कैसा है, वो बोलेगा मजा आ
I
रहा है, बहुत करोड़ों कमा रहा हूँ.
No, but I know some of the big players that were were working at like 60-70% of their capacity, and therefore 30% reduction in their capacity was a bit problematic for them. Eventually some of the guys realized ki bhai chalo ek kaam karo, let's invoice items differently to reduce the burden. Some absorbed the burden and tried to kind of keep those volumes up. But there was some pain. At least Delhi NCR के जितने भी लोग थे उनसे बात करो आप, मानेसर वगैरह में या भिवाड़ी वगैरह में, they had issues. So I wouldn't say कि मतलब इतना easy था उन लोगों के लिए. I think it was problematic. जेम्स वालों के लिए भी थोड़ा issue रहा. But by and large इतना ज़्यादा problem नहीं था कि they couldn't tide over. That I would agree.
इसीलिए मेरे को कोई टेंशन नहीं थी जब इसने 50% किया था. आई वाज वेरी कॉन्फिडेंट. आई वाज वन ऑफ दोस रेयर पीपल. अगेन लोग मुझे भक्त कर रहे थे. मैं बोल रहा था भाई मेरे को मेरी इंडस्ट्री का मालूम है, तेरे को तो नहीं मालूम. मैंने तो 20 साल निकाले उसमें. मैं तो लोगों को सिर्फ इतना ही बोल रहा था कि मुझे टेक्सटाइल की टेंशन नहीं है, बाकी का मैं कुछ बोल नहीं सकता.
नहीं, बांग्लादेश ऑल्सो हेल्प, राइट? अगर बांग्लादेश इस समय अपने सिचुएशन में होता, देन कुड हैव क्रिएटेड अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ कंपटीशन.
मे बी लोगों को अपने आप को ये पूछना चाहिए ना कि मे बी वी डिस्ट्रॉयड बांग्लादेश बिकॉज ऑफ दैट.
सो
हमने उनकी इंडस्ट्री शायद इसीलिए बर्बाद की.
उन्होंने खुद को ही बर्बाद किया. हमको तो कुछ करने की जरूरत ही नहीं.
हमने तो सिर्फ एक धक्का और दो किया, वो तो खुद ही गिर रहे थे. हमने सिर्फ एक धक्का और दिया.
And I'm very worried about that, but that's a separate conversation about what's happening in and around our neighborhood. But one thing is very clear, that in that region now, if you want to integrate with supply chains for some of these small countries, they would naturally also benefit from the fact that India now has a deal with the US. You see, one of the big issues of the last decade was ki bhai, will China plus one happen or not? Some countries went to Vietnam, some went to Indonesia, they boomed and everything. And China also helped them prop up their industry because they realized ki yaar, these countries are still okay. They're not a direct competitor relative to India. So that happened. But now those countries are also at a point where they don't have capacity and scale. So if you really want to have scale and capacity to kind of, be truly an alternative to China, that you would find only in India. So in that sense also, I think this deal is very important, and that's why you got 18% rather than 19 or 20, which some of your competitors got. Because this entire trade war issue, I think, is more focused on China and not so much as deficits in the US. So I think the idea is very clear somewhere ki China didn't play by the rules, and therefore we want to kind of rejig the system and kind of create our own supply chains away from them before they can kind of use our dependence on them as a way to extract concessions, whether that's Taiwan or something else.
Yeah, so okay, now let's get into I like the way your article you have framed it. So let's start with all the three questions then. Okay, how do Indian consumers gain from freer trade? Okay, let's go one by one. I actually liked it. मैंने share भी किया article तेरा. So let's break it down in the way you've written it down over there.
Right. So one of the things that I was observing yesterday is people were saying कि हमने zero कर दिया और उन्होंने 18 करा, ये कितना unfair है, this that. So I wanted to bring the conversation back to what is good and what really is something that we have experienced in India. Before 1991, by Chalalo Ambassador or Fiat, right? I mean, those were like such great cars that people still want to buy them, right? I mean, pun intended. No one wants to sit on those crappy cars. And the only reason why we have better choice today is because we did open up our industry and gradually allow more players to come in. So the idea is very simple. For consumers, if you can get the best possible product at a lower price point, it's a win for you. And what these new FTAs do is precisely that, right? So, for example, Australia, Europe, UK, US, now consumers have a choice. They can get the best from any of these countries uh, at a given price point, whichever works for them. So, if you have an Indian product which is now also competing with those, they have to do two things. Either they have to be of the same level of quality or the same level of price. So the consumer benefits because they get high quality products at a lower price point, which is a big win for them, obviously. Think of this as like, consumers now having access to cheaper French wine, British, Scotch, German cars, whatnot, right? Once our domestic industry realizes ki bhai, this is the competition and we need to up our game, they would also kind of, gradually raise their level up to that point. And once that actually happens, you would have more exports of those products. Abhi jaise, for example, we are observing Indian whiskeys are becoming a prized assets abroad, right? The only reason that's happening is because some of these distilleries have really invested in kind of the procedure of making them and branding and packaging and whatnot. So I think there's a little bit of renewed sense of confidence that's also there within the Indian industry that they can compete outside, which is why uh, this is the most opportune time to gradually reduce tariffs. So अब क्या होगा that Indian companies would compete not just in India but also outside, and that competition would again benefit the consumers. Uh, as we were discussing, some of the tariffs never made sense. For example, dry fruits that we don't even grow much in India, उस पे टैरिफ है। अब भाई हमारी दादियाँ कहती हैं, नानियाँ कहती हैं कि 5 बादाम भिगो के खाओ डेली, और उस पे यू पुट अ टैक्स, राइट? सो व्हाट आई मीन, essentially, if that tax is reduced, those badam would become sasta and badam से दिमाग बढ़ता है, so would be even beneficial for us in the long run. At least थोड़ा IQ भी ऊपर हो जाएगा over period of time by having those 5 badam. I don't know how much of that is true, but that's like an Indian myth. So in that sense, I think just the fact that we are reducing our tariffs alone, even without a deal, is beneficial for us.
Okay, fair enough. So there is this whole thing that Trump का tweet social post में 500 billion invest करेगा US में, ये वो, मतलब यार, why do people take what Trump says literally?
I would go a
ट्रम्प ने
step
1 ट्रिलियन तो सऊदी अरेबिया करेगा बोल दिया था.
no, but I would go a step further and I would say कि we are a $4 trillion economy. We would at some point in the next decade be much larger, obviously be much larger, maybe double the size that we are today. Why not have $500 billion of trade with the US every year? Why not want to get to that point? See, India's future is in more trade. We need market for our high value products, right? And US is a large enough market, so we can do 500 billion of trade with the US, with the EU, with each of these big company, trade blocks, if we want to. The question really is, are we going to put a limit on our ambition and say कि नहीं, we'll only trade 100 billion इससे ज़्यादा नहीं? And mind you, I think as of today हम 80 billion के आसपास का हमारा trade of goods है, और 80 के आसपास सर्विसेज है. So we're already at 160 because services are a big part of what we import and also what we export. So we're already at 160 billion. So 160 say at 4 trillion, you can always go to 500 once your economy gets bigger, right? And
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is Trump claims कि हम अभी करेंगे वो. It's ridiculous to say that what
he didn't
Trump
say
has written
abhi.
is true.
He didn't say abhi. He didn't specify a time period. So that's the other thing that people are missing. He didn't say
वही
कि
तो
एक साल.
Indians need to understand that ना. Indians are like अभी opposition को देखो कि ये मोदी ने देश को बेच दिया. क्या आदमी अपना सर
मतलब
किधर मारे अभी समझ नहीं आता.
एक और चीज है, ट्रेड में है, आप पैसे देके चीज ले रहे हो, आप पैसे देके कुछ मिल भी तो रहा है ना आपको, मतलब लाइक आप दुकानदार के पास जाते हो, उसको पैसे देते हो, उससे आटा लेते हो, फिर जाके ये तो नहीं बोलते कि भाई दुकानदार ने तो लूट लिया मेरे से, मेरे पैसे ले लिए। अरे भाई पैसे के बदले तेरे को आटा भी तो दिया ना। सी द प्रॉब्लम इज देयर सो यूज्ड टू फ्रीबीज that they don't get the concept of paying for something and getting something in return. They didn't do that for what, like 60 odd years, so they don't get that concept that easily. But that's how the world functions. कुछ कुछ चाहिए तो कुछ देना भी तो पड़ेगा ना आपको।
क्या पता नहीं. आई थिंक इट्स जस्ट हमारा डिस्कोर्स
बहुत लो आईक्यू है। तभी
बहुत लो
बादाम पे
IQ.
तभी बादाम पे ड्यूटी कम करने की जरूरत है।
बहुत ही कि हमारे देश की ओवरऑल अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ थिंग्स इतनी वाहियात है
आई
कि
मीन सम
कई
पीपल
बार
वर सेइंग कि 0% किया तो उनको भी 0% करना चाहिए। अरे मतलब हाउ हाउ इज इट रेलेवेंट कि भाई उन्होंने 0 करा या 18 करा? वो तो उनको देखना है ना। दैट्स समथिंग दैट दे हैव टू डील विद। इट्स अ टैक्स ऑन प्रोडक्ट्स कमिंग इनटू देयर कंट्री। द पॉइंट इज इट चीपर देन योर कंपेटिटर्स? यस। तो बात वहीं खत्म होगी ना। यू हैव गो योर स्ट्रेटेजिक ऑब्जेक्टिव इज डन देयर। वो 18
एंड
हो, 15 हो, 10 हो, 0 उससे क्या लेना देना मतलब।
like I think they just it's become a fashion, especially on social media, to shit on the government of India because it gets a lot of clicks these days, shitting on the government and
That is,
Modi. So
but
इस चक्कर में I think people are just reaching levels of what I like to call compulsive contrarianism. कि
right,
एकदम hot takes देने का. Boss, the government can be criticized on multiple issues, but the one thing I'll praise this government on is the way they've handled the Americans. It has been a very effective way of handling the Americans, considering that our economy size is not that of China, and still, eating the 50% punishment. Punishment थी वो tariff और कुछ नहीं था. It was a freaking punishment. And eating it, standing up to America, telling them जा जो उखाड़ता उखाड़ ले, हम नहीं हिलते, and then keeping the doors open in the back, talking to them, and then coming up with a mutually agreeable thing. A trade deal, I think people fundamentally don't understand what a deal is. A deal is not a surrender. A deal is they given a bit, we given a bit. It's never ideal. A deal will never be ideal, no matter who gets a deal. Like,
right.
it's ridiculous. But anyways, we'll go to the next part that you have written. And this is something that has been concerning for people, that if we let American goods enter at 0%, we have no clarity on where and what. I mean, Piyush Goyal has done a press conference. All he said was some sectors will be protected, like dairy and all that. But uh, um, what about the Indian producer has been raised? Like the opposition has raised this. A lot of people have raised this. It's almost as if every time a budget comes, I know what the politicians of the opposition are going to say. ये budget जवान और किसान और आम नागरिक के खिलाफ है. मतलब I don't understand. And obviously the details of the trade deal are still in working. Like boss क्या मतलब अभी द बिगेस्ट विन इज कि इमीडिएट इफेक्ट से उन्होंने 18% कर दिया है. अब हम
Right.
डील की फाइन टीन करेंगे और साइन करेंगे. उसने 18% कर दिया, इसमें भी लोगों को प्रॉब्लम है. उसने तो कर दिया ना, हम तो जीत गए, हमारा तो इमीडिएट तो कुछ सॉल्व हो गया ना. उनका तो कुछ आना है, वो तो डील के बाद आना है.
Boy, that's the entire thing that people are missing, right? I mean, first of all, our objective was to get rid of the 50% tariff. That is accomplished. Second, fine print aega, there will be some give and take. That's okay. Third, even if we have to reduce tariffs, that in itself is good for us. So that's also a win for our consumers. And what it means for producers is also ki bhai, matlab, it opens the market of a developed country for them, so they can seek opportunities there. So I don't see how you can spin this as a lose for anyone. This is really a win-win situation. And I think वो कहते हैं ना, sometimes what happens is that you can do everything right, but one thing is missing, right? This is that one thing that was missing, in the sense that what what this deal would do is it would make the path to you know high income status for India much more smoother. And I think that's the reason why there's a lot of opposition, because people would eventually want कि यार ये deal अगर करते तो काश हम करते. You see, envy is also a form of flattery. So this opposition is coming from envy rather than anything else. Although I don't think anyone else would have done a deal, because naturally you have to be convinced that trade is the future of India to be able to do a deal. And I don't think that conviction is there in anyone else other than the present dispensation. But having said that, I think there's at least a reasonable expectation that this would have a significant effect on our economy, both in the immediate and obviously in the long run. So वो इसलिए भी थोड़ा सा मतलब पुश बैक हो रहा है. Look, if 2029 was fought with a weak economy, they would have they would have benefited, right? But this what this deal does is you would go into that election cycle with a very robust economy. So you have to understand where their opposition is also coming from.
Yeah, but still, like, the point is ridiculous. I'll explain on 3-4 parameters. This opposition ki तूने start में भी बोला था, like I have always said, why is the Indian car sector so protected? Like, boss, I don't like Tata cars.
Right.
I don't like. Okay, Mahindra की कार अच्छी है, Mahindra can survive.
I don't know. I don't know about Tata or Mahindra cars because I haven't personally, experienced them. But I do know that कि यहाँ पे Mahindra के tractors are sold, right? So Mahindra does sell a fair bit of tractors here in the US, which means obviously they compete here. So must be good stuff, right? Otherwise, why would they be able to compete here? So exactly the point that you're saying, right? The reason why possibly Mahindra cars might be better is because they are in some form competing in other markets. You need to create that same threat even for Tatas to kind of go out there and get things done. I do think that once they acquired Jaguar and Range Rover, they got a lot of tech of how to build cars. I don't know what they've done with those acquisitions, uh, and why that hasn't really translated into them kind of augmenting their entire passenger vehicle segment. Uh, but now this would of course, sorry, this would of course force them, right? They have an option of either to compete or to get bought by Mahindra or someone else.
Another point about affecting Indian production is also from a strategic autonomy perspective. Like, if we let all these things in, then we don't build it ourselves, तो हमारा क्या होगा आगे चल
यार अभी 70 साल में क्या बिल्ड करा, मतलब लेट्स बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट, 70 साल में what we are building delivery apps, okay, other than some handful sectors where we are competitive, what have we truly built? पेंसिल की निब बनाने के लिए चाइना स्पेंड 35 years, ये जो रोलर बॉल की होती है वो जापान से इंपोर्ट करते थे. दे स्पेंड 35 years जस्ट टू मेक दिस बॉल राइट. इट वाज अ नेशनल मिशन कि भाई ये बॉल बनाएंगे हम, प्रिसीजन इंजीनियरिंग. So we haven't, मतलब we haven't done it. So it's all good to have that स्वदेशी mindset that let's build everything ourselves. But कैसे करोगे, होगा कैसे? किसी को तो सिखाना पड़ेगा ना. किसी को तो आके बताना पड़ेगा कि इसको ऐसे करते हैं, इस स्क्रू को ऐसे टाइट करना है. अभी क्या है, आई डोंट नो इफ यू हैव नोटिस, समटाइम्स व्हेन यू लुक एट सम ओल्ड इंडियन प्रोडक्ट्स, कुछ स्क्रूज क्लॉकवाइज टाइट हुए हुए हैं, कुछ एंटी क्लॉकवाइज टाइट हुए हुए हैं. क्या
Yeah.
लॉजिक है? कोई लॉजिक नहीं है. बस उसका मन था ऐसे टाइट कर दिया, उसका मन था ऐसे टाइट कर दिया, राइट? सो someone has to come in and kind of teach how to produce stuff for the world. That you will get to know only if foreign guys come in or if your guys go out and compete. India ka protected market gives our firms an enormous leverage कि भाई बाहर जाने की जरूरत ही नहीं है, यहीं पे let's compete here itself and let's not allow others to come in so that we can do whatever we are doing and still make healthy profits. But कब तक, कब तक? I mean, that's the entire question that, we should ask, right? Till when? Um, and I know there's a lot of our friends believe that protectionism is good. That's how East Asia developed. And there is some merit to that argument. I wouldn't say that there's no merit to that argument. But even there, the protection that was offered was very strategic and was not just in form of trade protection, but was also in the form of heavy subsidies and tariffs, right? Are we doing that? PLIs, yes, we are doing that to a large extent. But is industrial power in our country cheaper than residential power? No, it's not. But in some of these countries, it is. So there's states in India where industrial power is more expensive to subsidize consumers. So they can obviously not compete, right? So what these deals also do is it kind of opens up a pressure valve. Now Indian industry would also realize कि यार बाहर के जो companies हैं इनको ये advantages offer होते हैं, which is why they can compete. So then they'll also go to the government and ask for those same advantages. So the focus would shift from preferential access to improve the regulatory architecture of the country, improve the cost of capital, reduce it for us and stuff like that, right? So we'll really be doing stuff that we should have been doing if we wanted to build things, but we just didn't do it because there was no pressure to do it.
Yeah, but in the case of China, right, like I'll give you an example. They did not let American companies enter the social media companies. They just didn't.
Yes, but I mean, yeah, and again, I know that there's an argument that many people have that we should also have our own social media companies. Uh, well, then build one and build one that's genuinely good and great and scale it. Matlab, there's nothing stopping.
How do you scale it? The problem with social media is network externalities. You literally have to ban something for another option to come up.
Well, I mean, that's because we were late, right? Facebook जब आया तब तो कोई ban की जरूरत नहीं थी, right? We could have come up with Facebook as well and created it if you wanted to. There's no reason. I mean, network effects come in only if you already have existing social media plays. But even when you do have existing social media plays, you had Twitter come up around the same time, Snapchat, Instagram, so many came and scaled it. So it's not a question of protectionism would give you a clone like inferior product. हमने बिना प्रोटेक्शन के भी बड़े देखे हैं ना, ये कू एंड ऑल ऑफ दोस प्रोडक्ट्स दैट वर क्रिएटेड, राइट? डिड एनी वन ऑफ अस fully use those? Honestly, did we even think of those as an alternative? Possibly download करा, यूजर ने बनाया, 2-4 दिन यूज करा, and then we went back to X, right? So the point is you cannot have a same product because that's where the network effects are strong. But there's no saying that network effects would not kind of uh, kick in if you build something truly great. TikTok bhi to aaya na. TikTok also kind of came, and after TikTok, Instagram had to pivot towards Reels. So Instagram learned from TikTok. So in general, I'm in general not in favor of having these kinds of barriers and bans because I really do feel they lead to inferior products. So if you want to have something of that form, you have to have a very solid explanation, and even after that you need to do dozens of different things to make it worthwhile. हमारे यहाँ क्या होगा कि हम बैन कर देंगे and then we'll not do any of the 10 other things, and when you don't do the 10 other things then you end up back at the same situation. And it's not because the government doesn't want to do it. Even if the government wants to do it, it's a question of capacity. We at the end of the day have to realize that state capacity in India is still very limited. So they cannot do everything. And China has enormous state capacity because it's a country that's largely governed by a single party, and they can get things done that, of course, India cannot. I would also say that there's a lot of envy in India vis-a-vis China. I think that's also wrong. You people think कि भी चाइना में ये कर सकते हो, वो कर सकते हो, लैंड एक्विजिशन का प्रॉब्लम नहीं है ये, and all of that stuff. I think we are envious of Chinese for all the wrong reasons. We are envious because they're authoritarian, because they kind of, get stuff done without due consideration for their wills of people, etc., etc. Those are not the reasons to be envious of the Chinese. If you want to envy them for their work ethic. They work very hard, right? They get stuff done. So if you meet a worker there in a factory, उसका फोकस यही है कि भाई मैं आउटपुट मैक्सिमाइज कैसे करूं, पैसे लूं, घर जाऊं, राइट? दे आर वेरी हार्ड वर्कर्स. हमारे यहाँ पे वो बीच में रील भी बनाएगा, चाय कॉफी भी पिएगा. सो सो मतलब 8 घंटे में आधे घंटे का लंच ब्रेक भी चाहिए. So priorities are different. So we need to kind of get a grip on the reality that we as a country need to really work hard, and only then you can build stuff, right? And even if you work hard, you need someone to tell you how to build stuff. So hopefully these trade deals would kind of help you bring in some foreign investments, get foreign companies to set shop here. Take Apple supply chain as an example, right? So many things are happening because Apple decided to shift its production to India. And because of that, a lot of firms are now realizing how to do this right. Otherwise, you had only Dixon and a couple of other companies that knew exactly how to do electronics manufacturing. So जो spillover benefit होता है, जो know how transfer होती है, that's again an important part of foreign investments.
Yeah, but okay, some level of protectionism obviously is going to be there in critical infrastructure and other things. We just can't let some of these companies in that sense. But yeah, overall, I like when it came to this entire Starlink thing. Also, I did not understand why there was opposition to it. मतलब यहाँ तो खुद बना लो, खुद बनाना नहीं है और दूसरे को बोलना है कि तू क्यों बना रहा है भाई, और वो आ रहा है तो तू क्यों ला रहा है भाई. नहीं, उसको एक काम कर, उसके ऊपर इतनी ड्यूटियां मार दे, इतनी ड्यूटियां मार दे. बट देख, मैं तेरे को एक बताता हूँ,
But
इलेक्ट्रिक
duty
कार्स
is
में
duty.
क्योंकि हमने बाहर वालों को आने नहीं दिया, महिंद्रा की इलेक्ट्रिक कार अच्छी बनी.
Yes and no. Yes and no. मतलब you're saying कि हमने आने नहीं दिया इसलिए अच्छी बनी. I am saying अगर आने दिया होता तो शायद और अच्छी बनती. And
नहीं,
also
और अच्छी का आर्ग्यूमेंट ऑब्जेक्टिवली तेरे को प्रूव करना पड़ेगा. डिफाइन एन और अच्छी कार.
you could we don't have a random control trial, right? So we cannot prove either of those arguments, because we don't have a world where we would have allowed Chinese companies to come in and kind of flood Indian EV space. But having said that, also keep in mind that Mahindra is still competing, maybe not for EVs, but for other its motor vehicles divisions are competing with other parts of the world. So there's some knowledge transfer that also happens because of that process. EVs, where people think about Chinese EVs at $10,000-12,000, that's only possible because of heavy subsidies in getting that supply chain network in order that they have done. Mines, batteries, this, that no country has. So I'm not saying that you open up your electric vehicle segment to the Chinese companies, but you can at a minimum open it to, say, for example, Tesla. Right? Let it come, let people see whether it works, whether it doesn't work. What that will do is that will also give a sense of Indian players ki bhai software plays equally important in these new cars. So electric vehicles are nothing but a computer on wheels. So software becomes very important. So naturally, what would eventually happen as a part of competition is at some point one tech company would realize ki Mahindra knows how to make great cars, but they make crappy softwares. So let's kind of make a car together which has better software, and their engineering team can design the car and we'll just work on the software. Take example of TVs, right? TVs, अभी smart TVs आते हैं, all their softwares are crap. 2 साल बाद slow हो जाते हैं. So you need to plug in either a Fire Stick or a Apple TV or a Google Chromecast, right? The only reason you need to do that is because some of these companies are pure software plays. So they know how to design software for TVs. Eventually, at some point, if these companies were to make TVs, they would be much better than what some of these LG, TCL, etc. are making. But the reason they don't want to is because they don't know how to create these displays and stuff like that, right? So it's a perfect blending of an additional device on the existing hardware and enhancing the consumer experience. अब वो जो पूरा का पूरा कंज्यूमर एक्सपीरियंस का स्टैंड पॉइंट है दैट यू गेट टू एक्सपीरियंस इन टेस्ला. If say Mahindra were competing with Tesla in that price segment, naturally consumers would demand the same kind of software play. So that would, of course, force them to improve, partner with say TCS or Infosys, get the right software, get the get the entire software hardware play in order. Once they do that, that would also trickle down to their sasti EVs, right? It's not going to be restricted to the higher end model. So all I'm saying is that protectionism works if you have South Korea, China level of other things in order. हमारे वहाँ वो other things are not in order. So if you have protectionism, it's not going to benefit you. You'll end up with slightly inferior product than what you could have gotten in the absence of it. Land
Yeah, but
price, land is expensive, labor is expensive. वहाँ के reforms, even though they've done it 300 के बाद, you still need permission for retrenchment, right? So there, if you want to build these things with protectionism, then you need to kind of really let go a lot of those things. अभी Foxconn को some panchayat sent a letter saying कि भाई property tax भरो. I don't know if you saw that. Gram panchayat
हाँ
sent.
12 लाख का.
हाँ. So let's say you have protectionism. Do you think with these kinds of things you would be able to develop that scale?
Yeah, but every country has some level of protectionism. The American farmer is protected. The Canadian farmer is protected.
In form of
China's social media.
mostly subsidies. You can subsidize. I'm not against subsidizing. If you want to protect, give them subsidies. I mean, but don't restrict market access. That's the entire premise of the article. That there are ways to still protect your people.
Canada dairy तो protected है. It's not subsidized. Protected है.
So you're saying कि वहाँ पे American milk नहीं आता?
आने नहीं देते. इसीलिए तो वो इतना नाराज है वो फूफा कार्नी से.
So I don't
It's a
know
proper
about
cartel.
I don't know about the milk, but my own sense is any form of protectionism is never a great idea. You need to have, as I said, very solid justifications to be able to do it.
No, but जैसे COVID में this entire global supply chain was exposed. That if you don't have basic things by yourself,
That's a different problem. So the reason COVID became a problem was because first there was too much concentration of the supply chain in the hands of one country. And when that node became a problem, then everything else kind of collapsed, which is precisely why you're doing things differently now. You're doing a so-called China plus one, multiple suppliers, diversification of supply chain initiatives, largely so that that problem does not arise. The solution is
yeah,
not to go in the opposite direction of saying that we'll make everything from pencils to planes, because we tried from the first 5-year plan till the last 5-year plan, up to we do 3-year plans, and we didn't make much progress.
no, I understand. I'm actually more on the opening of the economy, but I'll give you another example. Chinese cars are not allowed in America, and they created a huge furor that Carney allowed some Chinese cars, EVs, in Canada.
Right, but see, that's their decision. That's the Canadian government's decision whether they want to allow Chinese cars in or not. See, the point is, as I said, all arguments for free trade have to change when you talk about China, because what they have done uh, since their introduction in WTO is very different than what any of the other advanced countries or emerging market has done since they were brought in a part of the global trading network. The extent of subsidies, the extent of support that the Chinese gave to their industry is much bigger and much larger. So once you have that thing at the back of your mind, you would realize ki all arguments vis-a-vis China, unfortunately, for free trade don't really work, because free trade के लिए एक और aspect है ना, that they should also be playing by the same rules. अब मैं और आप क्रिकेट खेल रहे हैं, ठीक है, एंड वी हैव अ रूल कि आप अगर आउट हुए तो 3 बार आउट होगे तब आपको आउट माना जाएगा, और मैं अगर 1 बार आउट हुआ तो मैं आउट हो जाऊँगा। So
हम्म
what is the point of that game? We already know you will win, right? So
हम्म
so that's exactly the issue here. I mean, if again we are talking about counterfactuals, if China would have been more like South Korea in terms of when they approached, global trade, when they joined WTO, we wouldn't have had the backlash against globalization or hyper globalization. The only reason that happened is because they weren't like South Korea.
फेयर इनफ। चल मैं ना अभी 4-5 और कमेंट्स जो लोगों ने, चाइनीज फर्टिलिटी रेट इज 1.2, 16% ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन इज ओवर 65, इट विल बी द नेक्स्ट जापान इन 30 years. Its super power status will be short lived. I don't know, only time will tell. 30 years, hopefully, if I stay alive, I will troll you if you are wrong, Divya Reddy. ये तो पॉइंट हमने कवर कर दिया था। ट्रम्प क्लेम्स इंडिया इज गोइंग टू इन्वेस्ट 500 billion in US. Where will all this money come from? Will government charge? Trump says collect money and invest in the fund. Like,
So first of all, whenever these numbers are 500 billion, I saw one journalist also kind of compared it with Indian government ka size of the budget. That's so silly because this is like whatever people would buy, whatever trade would happen. It's not a government to government trade. It's a trade between people and businesses and business transactions. As I said, you're already at 160 billion. It's a big number. 160 billion is not a small number, right? So you're already doing a lot of trade. So I don't see why this shouldn't be 500 billion in the next few years. If anything, uh, in the absence of this agreement, we would have maybe taken like say 6-7 years to get there. With this agreement, we might get there much sooner.
fair enough. और क्या है? Okay, हाँ. Why is Rahul Gandhi wasting the budget time? Okay, that has nothing to do with this. Mahindra is participating in motorsports like F1E. By मैं नहीं देखता, मुझे नहीं मालूम। मुझे उसकी थार बड़ी अच्छी लगती है, गाड़ी बड़ा मजा आता है। चलाई है मैंने, अच्छी गाड़ी है महिंद्रा थार। अरे चला, मस्त गाड़ी है, बहुत बढ़िया गाड़ी है। मुझे समझ पड़ता है कि लोगों को टेम्पटेशन क्यों होती है लोगों के ऊपर रौंद के चले जाने का थार के पास। अच्छी गाड़ी है, एक्चुअली अच्छी गाड़ी है। ओके, ये किसी ने भी बोला यूएस कार मार्केट इज प्रोटेक्टेड, नो चाइनीज कार।
इट्स नॉट भाई। जब जापान, टोयोटा इज द लार्जेस्ट कार सेलर फॉलोड बाय कोरियंस. Think about it. Like, which is the most sold car in the US? Toyota Corolla. These days, I mean, these annually it might be Camry, right? Toyota wants it to be RAV4. Hyundai wants to be the largest car seller in the US as well. These are not American companies. These are Japanese and South Korean companies. They are selling their cars. They make very good cars, exceptional cars. So, कहाँ है protectionism? मतलब, I don't see it.
But they manufacture all those cars in America.
Not
They
all.
don't export them.
Not all. SKDs भी आते हैं. It's a very complex supply chain.
No, most of the US car manufacturing is Canada, America, and Mexico.
मेरी South
That's
Korea
why they need Kuzma. That's why they have Kuzma, right?
मेरी South Korea से आई है, पूरी assembled. So
Okay.
so it's and मतलब वो the same version of the car is also manufactured here in the US. So you have the option, you want to get whichever one. मेरे को पता नहीं था कि last year if you would have gotten the one assembled in US, you would have gotten a tax rebate. So मेरे को पता होता तो I would have possibly done things differently. But broader
basically तू ये कह रहा है कि इंडियन इंडस्ट्री को टैक्स बेनिफिट्स और सब्सिडीज दे दो, इन लोगों को टैरिफ हटा दो, तो ये लोग आर्ग्यूमेंट नहीं दे सकते।
नहीं, मैं ये भी नहीं कह रहा कि टैक्स और सब्सिडी मतलब सब्सिडीज भी दे दो इंडियन इंडस्ट्री को. बी वेरी स्ट्रेटेजिक, राइट? अब फॉर एग्जांपल पेंसिल मैन्युफैक्चरर को सब्सिडी देने की जरूरत नहीं है इंडिया में, क्योंकि वहां you're already
उसमें इकोनॉमीज ऑफ स्केल और कॉस्ट कॉम्पिटेंस ऑलरेडी अचीव्ड है.
एग्जैक्टली. सो you have any subsidy is ultimately public money, ना?
Hmm.
So you are custodians of public money. So you have to be you have to optimize for the maximum return that you can drive on a single rupee of subsidy that you give. ऐसा तो है नहीं कि इंडियन गवर्नमेंट के पास लाइक खजाना भरा पड़ा है एंड दे कैन लाइक जस्ट बांटते जाएं हर जगह एंड वी नीड टू स्पेंड ऑन अ लॉट ऑफ अदर एरियाज वेयर वी आर right now not able to spend as much as we should. So
चलो, किसी ने पूछा, would this deal also have any relation to the data center initiative of the government?
I think data centers would definitely pivot to India because the energy cost of running data centers is very high. So at some point, it would be very likely that companies would realize it's feasible for them to shift data centers there. And yeah, utility bills are going up because of data centers. So I think that would happen possibly within the next 2-3 years would start happening in a bigger scale, at a bigger scale.
I think the best thing Trump did for India was the H-1B ban. That's
I
what
think I think he did a lot of good things by forcing us to do reforms.
Yeah.
And of course,
He
opening up our economy, right? I mean, without the incentive to open up, we wouldn't have opened up to the extent that we did. So if you look at the last 10
absolutely.
years, tariffs were going up. Now they're going down, which is great news for our consumers. And as I said, producers would have to compete, but then they would also get access to newer markets to compete. So I think overall this is a big win-win for everyone. So,
Yeah.
so I
Actually, in
think
hindsight, Trump and his
मेरा
cuckoo
जो
behavior is
आर्टिकल
very
है
good for the world.
मेरा जो आर्टिकल है, आई डोंट नो इफ यू सॉ, उसमें मैंने एंड में लिखा है दैट in economics it's all about trade-offs.
Yeah. Thomas Sowell ka favorite line hai, life is about trade-offs.
But this is the first example where you have a deal where there are no trade-offs. It's a win-win. It's genuinely a win-win. And in my 10 years of or so of writing about the economy, I haven't found a win-win policy yet. So I think this is going to really help both these economies kind of get closer, specialize, build scale. And that's also good for the world, right? Because eventually you want the two democracies to kind of be much more closer. I don't know why some people have this China envy. I don't think we should be envious of what they have as a system. So that's basically where I see the world heading, and that's pretty good actually.
Yeah, well, let's see. Abhi the Canadian PM is also going to come, and I think we're going to purchase 3 billion worth uranium in 10 years from Canada. That's about to happen. We're going to sign a Canadian trade agreement also. That will also be very beneficial for both the countries. I think Donald Trump has basically, through his erratic behavior, kind of pushed everybody to some weird corner. And one last thing about the trade deal, right? Trump spoke about Russian oil, and it's like, I just want to clear the record. People don't even know that 3 years ago we were not even buying Russian oil. India has a
Yeah,
strict policy; it doesn't buy sanctioned oil. So the Americans sanctioned Venezuela, we stopped buying Venezuelan oil. They sanctioned Iran, we stopped buying Iranian oil. They told us to buy Russian oil under the Biden administration. We bought Russian oil.
no, so
Then this
I
happened.
don't. People forget that in 2020, US was the largest or among the largest energy suppliers to India.
Yeah.
So then oil price spiked, and we had to kind of do this because for our energy security. Now oil prices are like sasta, really sasta. So there's no reason why we shouldn't go back to what we were doing in 2020.
Exactly.
So
So that's the last bit I wanted to cover. Like, it's ridiculous, to be, why should we stop buying Russian? Because like there are actually people who follow this stuff, and we clearly are seeing signs of India eventually is not going to increase its cost, and that has been conveyed to the American administration in not so many ways. But ये किसी ने क्या लिखा है? Automakers need to match Japanese and Korean quality of reliability if you really want to compete with the big boys. Right now, Desi cars feel inferior to Kia, Hyundai, etc. Even VinFast is better. Honestly, I will not argue. I will not argue.
So Hyundai spent so many years competing with Toyota, and eventually they got it right. Right? It's not a one day thing. Toyota, Kia, they competed with the American companies and they were losing big time. And then they started competing with the Japanese and then they were losing big time again. And eventually, after many decades of competing with Toyota, they realized how to make good cars. So that again proves my point. You need competition if you want good quality products to kind of emerge. So if Hyundai wouldn't have competed with Toyota, you would have had the same issue with them too. So now you need, of course, Tatas and Mahindras to also do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think overall, all things being equal, I think overall it's a net positive for everyone, both the Americans and the Indians. And credit to the Prime Minister. I think sticking sticking to our guns and making the Americans wait was the best thing to do. And listen, at the end of the day, na, we should not be as like, yes, Sunadal, Trump ko wo Sunadal. Beyond the point, it should be about what benefits the Indian. Like one of the biggest trade-offs is uh, how much of our ego is worth our economic growth. आई थिंक दिस इज गुड इनफ. ट्रंप को जो
Right.
बकवाती करनी है करने दो. अभी ट्रंप कम से कम 40 बार बोल चुका उसने पाकिस्तान इंडिया की वॉर रुकवाई. अभी क्या करोगे तुम? क्या कर सकते हो? हमने तो जो बम मारना था मार दिया ना पाकिस्तान को. तो मार दिया तो मार दिया. अभी बस ठीक है. It's like that. Anyways, chalo, we'll wrap up now. Karan, thank you very much. And we will see where it goes. So chalo, guys, if you want to follow Karan, follow him on X. You can read his articles. His website address is also given. So I'll leave you guys there. Jisko jo karna hai kare. Baki, overall, I think this trade deal is a net positive for both the countries. And whether people like it or not, I think that's the final conclusion. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.